Sometimes all you can do is stop and take stock of what you've been doing with your life. In my case, I've noticed that I've made a big mistake during this pandemic. I bought cookies, and this is something that I usually don't buy, and I left them in the kitchen, and now whenever I go there, get me some water, I see the cookies and I eat them. So I put on some weight. But today I'm not going to talk about this kind of mistake. I'm going to talk about a more interesting kind of mistake, which is Portuguese mistakes that you might make as you progress along your Portuguese journey. The first thing you have to know is each student, each person has their own evolutionary path in Portuguese, so to speak. So, the kinds of mistakes I'm talking about here today are the most common ones. You might come from a different background, speak a different native language, so probably you don't make all of those mistakes if you are not a native English speaker or a very advanced English speaker who learns Portuguese through English. And I will have a different video for my friends who speak Spanish because that's also a very good source of interference and problems too. But today I'm going to talk about the five most common mistakes. The first one that we have is using gerund instead of infinitive. Gerund is this little ing that we put after the verbs. Actually, we add them to the verbs, we attach them, right? And we say, for example, sentences like, studying Portuguese is very important. And when you render that sentence in Portuguese, you can't really say estudando português é muito difícil. That's something that people say, but you don't need to. Now you know this is a very common mistake and you can avoid it. Whenever you have ing in English, think about it. Is this the main thing in the sentence? For example, speaking Portuguese is hard, or is this kind of after some preposition? By speaking Portuguese, you can communicate with your friends. This is another usage. In Portuguese, whenever it falls in those two positions, you never, ever, ever want to use gerund. So, estudar português é fácil. Studying Portuguese is easy. Falar português é muito divertido. Speaking Portuguese is a lot of fun. That's the first mistake. The second one is using por instead of para. And I do acknowledge that's a very hard one, a very, very tough one. So if you want to check a more in-depth explanation about that, you can check the article down below here or up in the description if you're seeing this on Facebook, because I have more explanations there and it's way, way, way more in-depth. Something else that you should keep in mind is that those prepositions are always a problem for people when they are learning a foreign language. So Portuguese is no different. Whenever you need to use them, you have to kind of memorize the situations or at least know the general rules. For example, the sentence that I have as an example here is Eu estudo português 3 vezes para semana. Not para semana. You should say por semana because this is a expression of time. So por semana, por mês, por dia, por ano. That's how you would express it. And when translating something like for each lesson there is a file, you might be tempted to say por cada lição, por cada aula, existe arquivo específico. Para cada aula, existe arquivo específico. As this is a quick discussion of the common mistakes and things that you should be aware of, you don't need to, we are not going to go in depth. But if you want to check again, take a look at the article because there you will find way more explanations about that. Okay, so the third, and this is a very common mistake too. I would expect it wouldn't be so common, but some people make it, so not so many people actually, but only when they are right at the beginning. When they evolve and when they progress a little bit, they usually overcome that very like this, like magic. And this is using para with the infinitive because the infinitive of the verb, the dictionary form of verbs in English usually are followed or are preceded by a to go, to see, to do, to want, right? And in Portuguese, we don't have that. Actually, it's the ending of the verb that means, oh, it's the infinitive. It's the dictionary form of this verb. So when you say sentences like, I want to study every day, you would say, eu quero estudar todos os dias. This is a very common thing. But what I hear people saying is, eu quero para estudar todos os dias. Forget it. Not quero para estudar, never para, translating I want to study, I want to see. This to, you don't really need it, okay? And sometimes it also happens with prepositions. For example, I've heard a student saying that, I think last week, and I heard this student saying, sem para estudar todos os dias, é impossível falar português. And this is the wrong sentence. I offered this student a correction, and the student was very glad because it was very quick. And actually, it's a beginner, so it's natural that this mistake happens. So, sem estudar português todos os dias, é impossível aprender. That's, or é impossível falar bem. You could say both. Sem estudar, sem fazer. You might also feel tempted to add the gerund here, sem fazendo, sem estudando, but here, no, drop it, okay? Forget about it. Don't use gerund or para with infinitive here. It's not necessary. Now, fourth mistake, not using subjunctive in Portuguese when it's necessary. And this one is another tough one. Actually, that's such a common mistake, even for Brazilians sometimes. But if you want to express what you mean in a more precise way, and you don't want to lose anything in translation, so to speak, you have to use the subjunctive after some verbs that denote wish, desire, command, or supposition, and after several conjunctions that we have in Portuguese. Unfortunately, the list is too long for me to say, for me to give you all the verbs and the conjunctions, but luckily I have two guides also in the article below or above, depending on where you are. And if you take the time, you're gonna overcome that like this too. But for example, eu quero que você faça isso. Wrong sentence. Eu quero que você faça isso. Right sentence. Quando ele chega mais tarde, diga a ele que preciso falar com ele. Not so good. Quando ele chegar mais tarde, diga a ele que preciso falar com ele. Much better sentence. When he arrives later, tell him that I want to speak with him. So, quando ele chegar, quero que você faça. Okay? And the fifth common mistake is not using the preposition with its verb. And this is I know it's getting repetitive. Like it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Okay, but it's also a tough one because in English, for example, you also have prepositions that go with verbs, and if you can explain to me why you do that, I would be very happy. But for example, make up for something. Why do you use for? Why do you use up for? Why don't only make or something like that? It's arbitrary. Nobody can explain. And again, if you can, please do that. I think not even Daddy here can explain to us why we have those prepositions. So, in Portuguese, some verbs, and there is a very short list with verbs that take a specific preposition usually. You have to use them with the preposition. The two most common ones that I can think of are the verbs gostar and precisar, because people say, for example, eu gosto a música brasileira. No. No. Eu gosto da música brasileira. Você gosta da música brasileira? Sim, gosto da música. Eu gosto de acarajé. And precisar, eu preciso ajuda. Eu preciso de ajuda. That's the right one. Okay? And although I'm saying, oh, this is a bad, this is a mistake, this is wrong, this is right, only the subjunctive one and the por and para one, those two are the most damaging to your communication. If you really want to make sure you say what you mean and you mean what you say, you have to master those two more quickly. The other ones, they kind of draw attention to themselves, but they're not really a big problem. All right, so those were the 5 big mistakes that I usually see my students making. And should you have any questions, or if you have any questions, which is better, right? Write them down here or send them to me, or check the the article that I leave here. And if you consider this useful, think about liking the video, maybe subscribing and sending me a message. Ha! Hope to see you soon and bye.